a year ago, I started talking about the hand. The hand as a representation for us as human beings, connecting with the inner world and the outer world. The interface between the physical and the non-physical. And I mentioned that the Navajo look at the hand, and each finger represents one of the bodily senses: sight, taste, hearing, smelling, feeling. And between the fingers there are empty spaces. Now those spaces, Navajo said, that's where there are invisible senses. I can't know what the Navajo think of as the invisible senses, but I've arrived at 4. The first is awareness, a sense of awareness. The second is a sense of drive. The third is a sense of balance, and the fourth is a sense of reverence or awe. And these 4 are the 4 directions, with the sense of awareness aligning with the rising sun, the sense of drive, ambition, and curiosity with the southern or the full midday sun. The third, the sense of balance, is with the setting sun, and the sense of awe and reverence is with the midnight. I also talked about that there are 4 boundaries, invisible senses of boundary that we have to, that we should teach our children. And they also correspond to the 4 directions. The first is a sense of boundary with the east, a sense of manners, to learn manners. That's connected with the south, with the noonday sun. The sense of morals, which is with the setting sun, and the sense of prayer or worship, which is connected to the north, the midnight. I also talked about 4 levels of moral thinking. Again, the first, connected with the rising sun, is a sense of power or might makes right. The second, connected with the south, or the full sun, the midday sun, is the sense of making deals, morality based on you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. There's no caring for the other in that place. The third is a sense of the golden rule, do unto others. That's where we start moving into caring about others. The fourth, connected with the midnight, is a sense of service. Those are invisible forces that we have to grow with. And that growth is always a spiral. It's a circle that's getting wider and wider like a spiral, or going up like a coil, like a magnetic coil. Well, today I wanted to talk about what Robert Bly in 1990 brought to us, to Walton and I, and the men in Minnesota. He introduced 4 types of thinking and the language that goes with those types of thinking. And these also correspond, these 4 correspond directly with all of those other senses in those directions. The first type of thinking that Robert brought up was concrete thinking and concrete language. And Robert used a poem as an example of this, because Robert loved to teach this material by using poetry and not just scientific manuals and education manuals coming out of the university. For concrete thinking, Robert used this poem, and it's titled Lamb. I'm going to use 3 poems from the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart that Robert collected and published in the early 90s. This is Lamb by Michael Dennis Brown. And it so happens that Michael Dennis Brown was the professor I studied with at the University of Minnesota. Lamb. Saw a lamb being born. Saw the shepherd chase and grab a big ewe and dump her on her side. Saw him rub some stuff from a bottle on his hands. Saw him bend and reach in. Heard 2 cries from the ewe, 2 sharp, quick cries, like high grunts. Saw him pull out a slack white package. Saw him lay it on the ground. Saw him kneel and take his teeth to the cord. Saw him slap the package around. Saw it not move. Saw him bend and put his mouth to it and blow. Doing this calmly, half kneeling, saw him slap it around some more. Saw my mother watching. Saw Peter. Saw Mimi with a baby in her belly. Saw them standing in a row by the dry stone wall in the wind. Saw the package move. Saw it stained with red and yellow. Saw the shepherd wipe red hands on the ewe's wool. Heard the other sheep in the meadow calling out. Saw the package shaking its head. Saw it try to stand. Saw it nearly succeed. Saw it have to sit and think about it a bit. Saw a new creature's first moments of thinking. Felt the chill blowing through me. Heard the shepherd say, "Good day for lambing. Wind drives them out." Saw the package start to stand, get halfway, kneeling. Saw it push upward, stagger, push, and make it. Stand, standing. Saw it surely was a lamb, a lamb, a lamb. I saw a lamb being born. Concrete reporting, concrete thinking about what is in the physical world, what's happening there. But if you notice, as this poem goes on, it's not just about the lamb and the physical world. There's a hint. There is an implication when he brings in his mother and his brother and sister-in-law and a new baby. All of that is happening in this poem. And this movement toward the family and towards life itself is more than just concrete thinking, which takes us to the second type of thinking. And that thinking that Robert brought up is an emotional type of thinking, or where we use psychological language. We talk about the effects and our relationship with the emotions. When Robert brought this in and wanted to use a poem as an example, he used Sharon Olds' poem, Saturn, about her relationship with her father. Just this past week, I received a poetry magazine, and in the magazine, there was a few new poems by Sharon Olds. And one of those poems was a long, extended poem about her relationship with her mother. I don't have time to read that long poem, but I was curious, almost excited to see that she was actually writing about her mother after writing about her father for so long. But I do want to read another Sharon Olds poem in this vein of the emotional language that we feel and the things that we have to deal with. And this is also in Rag and Bone Shop. It's called The Guild. Every night, as my grandfather sat in the darkened room in front of the fire, the liquor, like fire in his hand, his eye glittering meaninglessly in the light from the flames, his glass eye baleful and stony. A young man sat with him in silence and darkness, a college boy with white skin, unlined, a narrow, beautiful face, a broad, domed forehead, and eyes amber as the resin from trees too young to be cut yet. This was his son who sat, an apprentice, night after night, his glass of coals next to the old man's glass of coals, as he drank when the old man drank, and he learned the craft of oblivion. That young man, not yet cruel, his hair dark as the soil that feeds the tree roots. That son who had come to be, in his turn, better at this than the teacher. The apprentice who would pass his master in cruelty and oblivion, drinking steadily by the flames in the blackness. That young man, my father. We can feel all that depth of emotion, all of that coming through Sharon Olds, that language that she's using to describe this oblivion, the glass eye of the grandfather, language that talks about the emotions that we deal with. That's the second type of thinking. And the third type of thinking that Robert talked about was mythological. Mythological or metaphorical language and thinking. And we do that all the time in this circle. When we talk about stories, how they move through us, what the stories mean to each of us individually, and how it means to us in the culture. And we think of all of the men going through those same things. Is it a cultural phenomenon? That's the thing that Sharon Olds' poem, it starts talking about the cultural, the mythological, in ways that are more than emotional. That's more than emotion. We've done the mythological fairly well over the years in all of our conferences, and when we talk in the story circles, this mythological language, the story folktale language that we use, it's bigger than any of us individually. When we're in the middle of it, when we are in our story circles, even here, when we go in story circles across the world, we feel it, we share it. We know that language. We know what's going on in the other man if he describes, oh, that spirit in the bottle, that demon, I understand that. This type of thinking is also cultural. We know that stories, a folktale, is the dream of a culture. We've talked about that before. It comes from inside of the culture. It's like an artesian well moving through the earth, the soil of the culture. And that story carries it into each of us. I want to read a poem by Gary Snyder. This, for me, is fantastic, wonderful, mythological, metaphorical language. And this is a poem called Old Woman Nature. Old Woman Nature naturally has a bag of bones tucked away somewhere, a whole room full of bones, a scattering of hair and cartilage, bits in the woods, a fox scat with hair and a tooth in it, a shell mound, a bone flake in a stream bank, a purring cat crunching the mouse head first, eating on down toward the end. The sweet old woman calmly gathering firewood in the moon. Don't be shocked. She's heating you some soup. Gary Snyder. That takes us into the other world. We're no longer in the personal world, or we're out in the mythic world. We're out beyond ourselves, beyond the culture. We're touching into the spiritual world now. That's the wonderful thing about poetry. It gradually carries us into the spirit world. And then the fourth type of thinking is called ritual thinking. When Robert gave us this information, in my notes I quoted him saying, ritual thinking, that is way out there. We're not even going to go there. I had to think about ritual thinking, and I've never been able to talk to Robert about this, but I think we've experienced it. I think, Walton, you and I have experienced this over the years, and it's become clearer and clearer to me. Ritual thinking and ritual language includes and aligns with all of the physical senses and the invisible senses. So that ritual thinking and ritual language is what we do at the men's conferences. Sometimes we're very successful at it. Sometimes we kind of get there. But it's when we take a story and then we bring it into the world through some sort of ceremony, some sort of ritual. And that includes song. It includes poems. It includes the four elements of fire, water, wood, and air. It includes the sense of awareness, the sense of drive, the sense of balance, and the sense of reverence. All these have to align, and then they have to align with the concrete thinking, the emotional thinking, the mythological thinking, so that when we have ritual, we get all of the life force, this jumping up and living force that comes through. And the better that we do that ritual with focus, with intention, with open hearts, the more healing occurs. That's one of the things I'm really proud about the men that have stayed with this for so long, because they've healed their wounds. They've prepared for the next wounds that they've got to deal with, they have to face. And there's an inner strength. There's a joy that happens. And for myself, back in 1982, 40 years ago, I didn't realize that when I started writing Men Don't Dance in America, I was actually describing what I believed a ritual thinking should be. I had never experienced that kind of dancing, that kind of ritual thinking that occurs among men of indigenous traditions. And that's what the poem was all about. I felt deprived. However, I also understood we were moving in that direction. We were starting to align with different types of thinking. And a few years ago, during one of our winter conferences, this actually occurred, where the men spontaneously started dancing together, moving back and forth, singing a song that Miguel Rivera had taught us. We're doing this around a fire in the middle of winter. Orion, high in the sky, the snow on the ground. It was dark, with a few candles and torches around. And the connection that we all made as a group in that environment with all of the emotions that we had gone through, it felt like finally I actually understood into my bones what ritual thinking was. My mind was clear, my body was active, my voice was loud. This, for me, was what ritual thinking is. And I've been able to do that a couple other times since then. Walton, you can verify we did this a few other times. And we're just starting to learn this. These things that the indigenous people have known for ages and ages and ages. And it fills me with hope and joy. And I really think that we've got things ahead of us that can help heal the earth. And the earth is going to heal through us. And through us, I mean human beings. Because human beings have a hand. And the hand doesn't just represent those physical senses, the spaces in between representing the invisible senses. The thing that makes us human beings isn't just our fingers or our hand. It's the spaces between that allow these fingers to move and to grasp. It's not just the opposable thumb that makes us unique mammals. It's the space between the thumb and the finger. Also, it's the spaces in the joints and the spaces in the tendons that connect the bones of the joints. It's the spaces that allow us to bend and grasp, to teach, to do all the things that we have to do with a hand. And we can learn from this. We can learn about relationships. Good relationships need space between the two. They're connected. A good relationship is connected, but there's also space between the two, or three, or four, or five. And as you spoke earlier, Asher, they have to go back to the root. The nervous system that connects the fingers, connects us to the body and to the trunk. We're each a twig on that tree of life connecting back to the roots. I want to just add another level here, a level of memory. I'd like to say that there are also 4 types of memory that correspond to the 4 directions. And the first is a bodily memory, a physical memory. It's the autonomous memory that we have, the autonomous memory that keeps our heart beating, that makes us breathe. Then there's the cerebral memory, the memory that holds the images and the teachings and the learning and everything that's happened as we've gone around these circles. Then there's the cultural memory, the memory that we have from the people around us. And of course, the 4th memory is the universal memory. And these 4 also correspond to the 4 directions as we keep going around and around and around. And the complexity increases. It's like fractal geometry. It keeps on getting more and more complex. And at the same time, it's all connected.